Hello everyone and welcome to my Rolex 24 coverage here on the channel. I wanted to start out talking in kind of general brush strokes. Essentially give you a preview of what to expect from each of the four classes here at the Rolex 24. DPI, P2, GTLM, GTD. It's not quite a bandwagoner's guide, but you might as well consider it a bandwagoner's guide. So I'm standing out in front of the DPI garages, and more or less this is going to be the battle that you're going to be looking for the overall win. These are the top class prototypes, manufacturer bodywork and engines, all that good stuff. There have been 3 years of DPI so far at the Rolex 24, and they've only been won by 2 teams, and one of those teams no longer exists. So really, the car you really should be looking for is right behind me, the number 10 Wayne Taylor Cadillac that is now being driven by Scott Dixon, Renger van de Zande, Ryan Briscoe, and Kamui Kobayashi. I knew I would remember that. So generally speaking, this is the best team in endurance racing in the United States. They've got the most reliable car. The Cadillacs take up half of the field, and kind of the way we've seen it play out in the last few years is the Cadillacs are usually the last ones standing. They're the most reliable cars, and they seem to be the most consistent cars as well. And Wayne Taylor's probably the top dog in that class. Now, what's kind of interesting and what's going to confuse a lot of people, I talked about the fact that one of the cars that has won the Rolex 24 in the past no longer exists. That was the 5 car from Action Express Racing. Well, there's a car that looks almost identical to that car here this year, but it's coming out of the JDC Miller Motorsports stable. So a lot of people are going to be confused by that. Hopefully, I'll educate you a little bit on that. So what about the other 4 cars in DPI? You've got the 2 Mazdas. Those are the fastest cars that have ever gone around this road course in an official capacity. The problem with that speed comes the reliability factor. Are they going to be able to last the 24 hours? Their first win, of course, came in an endurance race at Watkins Glen last year. The problem with that, of course, is the fact that that's a 6-hour race. That's only a quarter of this race. And finally, we get to talk about the Acuras, both coming from Team Penske. More often than not, they are very fast, but it seems like they have a tendency to run into other cars. I think the key for Acura, whether or not they're going to win this race, is if they can find some of that consistency that we see from the Cadillac teams here at the Rolex 24. So it's been no secret that there's kind of been a short grid this year, the smallest in the history of the race, 38 cars. But thankfully, one of the classes is up pretty significantly from the way it was last year, and that's the LMP2 division. Now, unfortunately, there were 7 cars entered in this class. 2 of them have dropped off, including, unfortunately for a lot of people, myself included, who are enthusiasts, the Wickware Racing team. Not so much because they're a NASCAR team, but more because they were going to be the only team to not run the kind of preferred chassis, the Oreca chassis. As it stands, 5 of 5 entries in this category are all running the same package. So it should be a very even fight. The real story, I think, in P2, now that the Rick Ware Riley is out of the picture, is this team behind me, which Ben Keating is driving for. Now, ordinarily, Ben Keating driving in the Rolex 24 wouldn't be noteworthy, but for this year, Ben Keating will not only be competing in the LMP2 division, but he'll also be competing in GTD for the Ranch Resort team with a Mercedes GT3 car. So it's going to be, that's one that I don't think has been attempted for quite some time, where one driver is going to be in 2 different cars in a 24-hour endurance race. So there's obviously a potential not only for Ben Keating to win one class, he could win 2 classes. That will be, I think, one of the major stories to take a look at least when we're talking about LMP2. The class with the most fan interest, as you can probably tell behind me, is the GTLM division. There's a lot of interesting storylines here, and one of them is who's not here. Ford. There's no Fords entered this year. There were some rumors that there might be a private entry, possibly Ganassi stepping up without the factory help of Ford. That didn't transpire, that didn't happen. So the Ford GTs are not present. So we have a smaller field than we did have last year, but it is a strong field. The Risi Ferrari has returned. They're the most recent winner in the IMSA category. They have won at the Petit Le Mans. They really surprised a lot of people because they'd actually run the Rolex here last year. They missed the entire season, show up at Road Atlanta, and take care of business. The BMWs are here as well. Of course, the BMWs won this race in the category last season. I'm sure a lot of people who are familiar with the channel will know that Colton Hurt is driving for them. They also have some DTM guys, as well as Chaz Mostert from Australia in the Supercar Championship. But the real question in this category are going to be the two new cars coming from Porsche and Corvette. First, I'll talk about the Porsches. And I have to say, from a fan perspective, it's nice to know that I can report with certainty that the Porsches still make a lot of noise. They're not as high-pitched anymore, but they're still going to rattle your chest when you're standing next to them. That's exciting. Now, the thing that's going to be different from Porsche's new car versus Corvette's new car is that Porsche actually has race mileage on their car. With the way the WEC season works, they've actually run race distances, albeit 6 and 8 hours respectively, 4, 6, and 8 hours respectively, in the WEC. So they have a lot of race mileage on that car. In fact, I think they won on their debut in Silverstone with the new 911. The real question, I think the real storyline, and I think the thing that everybody's going to be interested in, is how is the new mid-engined Chevrolet C8R going to perform? It's definitely going to take the boomers a little while to adjust to the noise. It does make a different noise. In fact, I would say that if I had to kind of think about the noise and kind of describe it for you, it sounds very Viper. I know, sacrilegious. But generally speaking, and I may get struck by lightning for this, new cars generally do not perform very well at the Rolex. We saw that with BMW, we've seen that with Ford, we've seen that in the prototype division. It's a tough race to start the season with a new car. And they certainly have a lot of testing miles. I think their press release claimed something like they did like nearly 2,000 miles during Roar testing. But as we know, race miles and testing miles are always a lot different. And I think it's going to be a big uphill battle for Corvette to end up in victory lane here in GTLM. It's not impossible. Certainly don't want to count them out by any stretch of the imagination, but I would be lying to you if I said I'm picking Corvette. So if there's one word to define the GTD category, it's diversity. You've got 8 cylinders, you've got 10 cylinders, you've got a flat 6, you've got V6 engines. You've got all sorts of different makes and models. Ferrari, Aston Martin, Lamborghini has the lion's share. Audi has one car here. Mercedes, just a fantastic, diverse array of race cars here in this category. Largest in the field, but I think a lot of people are concerned about what's going on behind me at Lexus. The question is, what is Kyle Busch going to do this weekend? Now, it's nothing new that NASCAR stars are taking part in the Rolex 24. That's been happening forever. In fact, Jeff Gordon, a couple of years ago broke through as one of the first NASCAR guys to actually get the overall win. It's going to be pretty unlikely for Kyle Busch to get the overall win, but generally speaking, Lexus is pretty good in these endurance events, so I wouldn't count them out as a potential favorite to take home the win come the strike of the clock of 24 hours. But I think from a pure entertainment standpoint, I think you've got a lot of storylines. You've got the gear racing, the all-female driver lineup. You've got the Michael Shank angle if you're an IndyCar person. You've got the Kyle Busch angle if you're a NASCAR person. And then, of course, like I mentioned in the P2 segment, you've got Ben Keating running 2 categories at once. So there's a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces in this category. The return of Aston Martin, that's another thing that I think we need to talk about a lot, because essentially there's an Aston Martin factory team, which is kind of, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for kind of pointing that out, but essentially Aston Martin is running the team that was Paul Dallalana's. Of course, Paul Dallalana got hurt skiing, so he's not in the car, but the new Aston Martin is definitely a good-looking car. I've seen it run in the WEC. Now it's here in GTD. How is it going to perform? A lot of things, a lot of questions that are going to be answered over the next, 3 days and 24 hours. And I'm excited to share it all with you. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be prepared for an onslaught of Rolex 24 coverage coming to this channel very soon. And we'll see you in the next video.